It was a Tuesday evening when I walked in from work, still smelling faintly of motor oil and the sea breeze that clings to Tampa this time of year. Tyler was sprawled on the couch, controller in hand, while Megan scrolled on her phone, legs tucked under her like she owned the place. My wife, Denise, stood in the kitchen with her arms crossed, the same stance she used when she was ready to fire someone from her old job. "We've been talking," she said, not meeting my eyes. Tyler smirked. Megan didn't even look up. "It's not working, Frank. The kids don't feel comfortable with you here anymore. I think you should move out." For a moment, I thought I'd misheard her. Move out? From my own home? I stared at each of them, waiting for a punchline that never came. Tyler's grin widened, and Megan finally looked up, her expression dripping with smug satisfaction. Something cold and ancient settled in my chest, not just anger, but clarity. They thought they'd won. I said nothing. Instead, I let them believe it. Because the real truth was going to hit them like a hurricane. If you are watching this right now, drop a comment letting me know where you are viewing from. Kindly hit the like and subscribe to hear more real stories about family loyalty and betrayal. They might just change how you see your own relationships. My name is Frank Lawson. I'm 54 years old. I've always believed a man's worth is measured not just by what he earns, but by what he's willing to give. Maybe that's an old-fashioned philosophy, or maybe it's just the way I was raised, in a small house with peeling paint and a father who worked himself into the grave so my mother could stay home with us kids. He gave without keeping score. When I met Denise 7 years ago, I thought I'd found someone who valued that same principle. She was funny, warm, and sharp enough to hold her own in any conversation. She had 2 kids from a previous marriage, Tyler, then 16, and Megan, 14, and while most men might have hesitated, I didn't flinch. I was already in my mid-40s, financially comfortable from years running a marine repair business on the Tampa waterfront. I had my own place, bought outright before the 2008 crash, and no kids of my own. I told myself I was ready to step into a ready-made family. At first, they were polite enough. Tyler shook my hand when we were introduced, grip limp as a dead fish, but at least he tried. Megan gave me a half smile and called me Mr. Lawson for the first month. Denise was grateful, or seemed to be. I didn't move them into my home right away. For the first year, Denise and I dated while she and the kids lived in a small rental. I'd take them out to dinner, buy the kids things they needed, a new laptop for Tyler's school projects, a pair of expensive cleats when Megan decided she was definitely going to stick with soccer. When we got married, I told Denise they should all move into my place. It had 4 bedrooms, a pool, and was walking distance from the bay. She hesitated at first, pride, she said, but within a month they were fully settled in. That's when the little things started. At first, it was nothing dramatic. Tyler would leave dishes in the sink after dinner, even when the dishwasher was empty. Megan started borrowing my headphones, my portable speaker, my tools, never returning them unless I went hunting. Denise would smooth it over, saying, "They're just kids." But kids grow. And instead of those habits fading, they hardened. By the time Tyler turned 18, he was bringing friends over without asking. They'd sprawl on the couch eating pizza I'd bought, blasting music through my speakers while I sat in my own den feeling like a guest. I started to notice how Denise would defend them no matter what. When Megan dented my truck backing out of the driveway without permission, Denise said, at least she wasn't hurt. When Tyler accidentally used my credit card, the one I kept in my desk, to buy video games online, Denise brushed it off as a misunderstanding. "Frank, you've got more than enough. Don't make it a big deal." That one stung. I'd built my business from a single van and a rusty toolbox. I'd worked weekends, holidays, and hurricane seasons to keep it afloat. Everything I had was because I'd sweated for it, and yet here I was, being told I shouldn't make a big deal when a kid helped himself to my money. There were moments, though, when I thought we were building something like a family. The Christmas after Megan's first semester in college, she came home early from a party and sat on the porch with me. We drank hot cocoa and talked about her plans. She said she wanted to go into environmental law. I told her I was proud of her. She smiled, genuinely, and for a fleeting moment I thought maybe I'd broken through whatever wall stood between me and those kids. But the next day, she snapped at me for touching her stuff when I moved her laundry so I could use the washer. Tyler was no better. By his early 20s, he was working part-time at a gym, sleeping until noon, and still acting like I was some sort of intruder in my own home. If I asked him to mow the lawn, he'd groan like I'd asked for a kidney. Denise would just shake her head and say, "He's figuring things out." I noticed something else, too. Conversations would stop when I walked into the room. Denise and the kids would be at the kitchen island, talking in low voices, and when I came in, they'd scatter. Finances were another quiet battlefield. When I married Denise, I didn't make her sign a prenup. I wasn't thinking about protecting myself. I was thinking about partnership. She didn't have much in savings, so I took over most expenses, mortgage payments. Even though the house was already mine, I still paid property taxes and upkeep, utilities, groceries, the kids' tuition, car insurance. Denise quit her job after our second anniversary, saying she wanted to spend more time at home now that the kids were older. I didn't complain. I thought I was giving her comfort. But comfort has a way of breeding expectation. Soon, if I suggested cutting back on something, maybe skipping a trip or holding off on another upgrade to the pool, she'd bristle. What's the point of having money if we can't enjoy it? I reminded her more than once that I wasn't made of gold. Business has good years and lean years, and Tampa's storm seasons can wreck a marina overnight. But she'd roll her eyes, as if my caution was just me being miserly. The subtle disrespect started to feel less subtle. One evening, I came home to find the living room rearranged, my leather armchair pushed into the garage to make space for a bigger sectional Denise had bought for the family. She hadn't asked. Another time, Megan told a friend on the phone, right in front of me, "Yeah, this is my mom's house. My stepdad just stays here." I should have corrected her. I didn't. The niece began inviting her extended family for long stays without asking me first. Her brother camped in our guest room for 3 months while getting back on his feet. I paid for his groceries, his gas, even a root canal when he said he couldn't afford it. My friends noticed the way things were going. One of them, Carl, pulled me aside after a barbecue and said, "Frank, you're too easy on them. They don't respect you." I laughed it off. Carl's been divorced twice. I figured he was just cynical. Still, the signs were there if I'd cared to read them. Like the time Tyler called me by my first name at the dinner table, not Frank in a friendly way, but in that flat tone kids use when they want to strip you of authority. Denise said nothing. Where the afternoon Megan used my office without permission to have a Zoom call with her friends, moving my files around and leaving soda cans on my desk. When I confronted her, she said, "It's not like it's some important space. You just fix boat engines." I swallowed a sharp retort and walked away. I told myself they were just young, still figuring out boundaries. That if I stayed patient, they'd eventually see me as something more than a walking ATM. What I didn't realize was that patience was exactly what they were counting on. The tipping point, though, came so quietly I almost missed it. One Saturday morning, I was making coffee when I heard Denise in the kitchen with Tyler. They didn't know I was in the hallway. "I don't see why he needs to be here all the time," Tyler was saying. "It's weird. He's not even our real dad." Denise laughed softly. "It's complicated. But you're right, it might be better if he spent more time at his shop." Better for who? I stepped into the room and they went silent. Denise smiled like nothing had happened, Tyler slapped away, and I told myself I was imagining things. But the seed had been planted. Over the next few weeks, I noticed more closed-door conversations. More glances between Denise and the kids when I asked a question. I'd come home from work and find the three of them huddled in the living room, laptops open, talking in low voices. If I asked what they were discussing, they'd wave it off. Just planning some stuff. I didn't know it yet, but stuff meant me. By the 6th year of our marriage, I'd gotten used to being a background character in my own home. I still paid the bills, still stocked the fridge, still made sure the pool guy came every Thursday. But emotionally, I'd been moved to the guest room without ever leaving the master bedroom. I'd sit on the back patio in the evenings, bourbon in hand, listening to the muffled sounds of their laughter inside. Not the warm, shared laughter of family, the kind that includes you, but the insular laughter of people who share a private joke. I told myself I was being paranoid. That maybe they were just closer to each other because of their history. But deep down, I knew better. Trust is like a rope. You don't notice the fraying at first, but once a strand snaps, the rest give way faster than you can repair it. By the time that Tuesday evening came, the one where Denise stood in the kitchen, arms crossed, telling me the kids didn't feel comfortable with me in the house, the rope had already been hanging by a single thread. I just hadn't realized until then who'd been sawing at it all along. I didn't say a word the night they told me to move out. Not a protest, not a question, not even the reflexive "excuse me" most people would have managed. I just stood there, leaning slightly against the kitchen doorway, bourbon still in my hand, watching their smug little tableau like I was observing strangers in a play. The moment felt strangely suspended. Denise's voice had that brittle edge she used when she'd already rehearsed her lines in her head. Tyler lounged in the corner, wearing that cocky half-smile I'd seen when he'd beaten me at pool the week before. Megan crossed her legs, her phone resting in her palm like she was ready to start texting the moment this little scene wrapped up. They'd expected a fight. They'd wanted it, in fact. That's what stopped me from giving them one. Instead, I took a slow sip of my drink, met each of their eyes in turn, and said, "All right." Then I walked right past them to the den, where I sat for the next hour pretending to scroll through my phone while my mind ran faster than it had in years. Hurt came first. Not the sharp, hot kind, but the deep, hollow ache that spreads through your chest and settles in your bones. These were people I'd sheltered, fed, and supported, not for weeks or months, but for years. People who'd never paid a dime toward the property tax, who'd never written a check for the pool maintenance or the AC repair, who treated every upgrade and expense like a natural birthright. And now they decided I was the one who didn't belong here. I replayed every moment in my head, the closed-door conversations, the stopped laughter when I walked into a room, the way Denise had started accidentally forgetting to include me in plans. It all made sense now. This wasn't some spontaneous suggestion cooked up over dinner. This was a campaign. And like most campaigns, it had a goal. Anger came next. I've never been the kind to slam doors or yell until my face turns red, but sitting there in the den, I felt something dark coil in my stomach. Not rage exactly, rage is loud. This was quieter. Heavier. Like the steady, suffocating pressure of deep water. I thought about the last time I'd bought groceries, a week earlier. Nearly $300, and I'd carried in every bag while Tyler sat at the counter eating chips. I thought about the $1,200 I'd wired Megan last semester for books and supplies, then later saw her posting pictures from a trip to Miami. And I thought about Denise. About how easy it had been for her to side with her kids, to let them set the tone of the conversation, to look me in the eye and tell me I didn't belong in my own home. They had no idea. They thought this was Denise's house because she'd lived here with me for years. They thought the marriage meant joint ownership by default. They thought, and this was the part that almost made me laugh, that they could simply tell me to go, and I would. That's when the clarity arrived. See, anger can be blinding. But if you let it settle, it becomes something else, focus. And in that focus, I saw exactly what needed to be done. First, I had to confirm just how much they didn't know. So over the next few days, I played the part they'd written for me, the quiet, defeated stepdad processing his exit. I let them box up a few of my things from the living room and stack them near the garage. I even overheard Megan telling a friend on the phone, "It's almost over. He's leaving soon." Perfect. At dinner, I casually asked Denise how she wanted to handle the house once I was gone. She didn't even hesitate. "Well, I figured we'd just keep things the same. I'll handle the bills once you're settled somewhere else." I nodded, hiding the smile that threatened to break across my face. She truly thought she was about to inherit a paid-off waterfront property like it was a consolation prize in a divorce she hadn't even filed yet. But here's the thing, the house was mine. Not ours. Not the family's. Mine. I'd bought it 15 years before I even met Denise, in my own name, free and clear. No mortgage. No co-signers. Florida homestead laws meant it was protected from most claims, and my will, which Denise had clearly never bothered to ask about, left it to my sister, not to her. I'd kept the original deed and title documents in a safe deposit box at the bank, along with a folder of property tax receipts going back to the purchase date. All I needed was the right moment to bring them into the light. Still, I didn't want to just drop the news. That would have been too quick, too clean. I wanted them to feel it build. I wanted them to taste victory, to believe they'd succeeded, right up until the second I pulled the rug out from under them. So I began laying the groundwork. Step 1 was to make sure I had every piece of paper in order: deed, title, tax records, utility bills in my name. I spent a long lunch hour at the bank pulling copies and having them notarized. Step 2 was to start reclaiming small bits of space in the house, just enough to make them wonder. I moved my leather armchair back into the living room without asking. I started cooking dinner again, plating my meal first. Tyler muttered about it to Megan in the hallway. I made sure to accidentally overhear. Step 3 was patience. It took everything in me not to accelerate the timeline. Every time I saw that smug expression on Tyler's face or heard Megan talking about when Frank's gone, I had to swallow the urge to end it right there. But revenge, I reminded myself, is best served not just cold, but plated with precision. I also started keeping a mental catalog of their dependents, every expense they couldn't possibly cover without me. Denise hadn't worked in years. Tyler's part-time job barely covered his car payment, which, come to think of it, I also paid. Megan was still in school, living rent-free and dipping into my wallet for emergencies. Without my income, the whole house of cards would collapse. And that was the point. They'd gotten used to treating me like a fixture, reliable, replaceable, unremarkable. But what they didn't realize was that I wasn't the lamp in the corner. I was the foundation. Pull me out, and everything above comes crashing down. The last piece of my strategy came together on a Friday afternoon. Denise texted me, "We'll need you to be out by the end of next month. Gives you time to get sorted." Not would you be able to, or could we talk about it? Just a flat directive, like she was the landlord and I was an overstaying tenant. I stared at the message for a long moment. Then I typed back, "Sounds fair." I could almost hear their laughter from across town. What they didn't know, and what they'd find out soon enough, was that Florida law gave me more power than they could have imagined. As the sole owner of the property, I could give them 30 days' notice to vacate. If they didn't leave, I could file for formal eviction. And yes, that included my own wife. I'd never been the type to pull rank. But in that moment, I decided I was going to pull the deed. From there, it was just a matter of waiting for the right setting to make the reveal. I wanted it to be public enough to leave no room for denial, but private enough to avoid neighbors sticking their noses in. I settled on a Sunday dinner. Denise liked to do those in the dining room, with actual place settings and a roast chicken or ham. I offered to make it special, my treat, I said. She smiled, thinking I was softening. Let her think it. In the days leading up to it, I played the part flawlessly. I looked at rental listings online where they could see me. I mentioned packing up to friends over the phone, knowing Megan was in earshot. I even let Tyler borrow my drill set since I won't be needing it soon. By the time Sunday rolled around, they were practically giddy. I'll admit, a small part of me wanted to back out. Not because they didn't deserve it, they did, and more, but because once I dropped the truth, there was no undoing it. The marriage would be over. Whatever thin thread connected us as a family would snap. But then I remembered the look on Denise's face when she told me to leave. Not regret. Not sadness. Just cold, rehearsed dismissal. She'd made her choice. I set the table myself, placed a deed and notarized copies of my ownership papers in a plain envelope under my chair. We ate. We talked about meaningless things, or rather, they talked, and I listened. When the plates were cleared, Denise leaned back in her chair. "So, have you figured out where you'll go?" I reached under my seat, slid the envelope onto the table, and smiled. "I have," I said. "And so will you." Her brow furrowed. Tyler frowned. Megan looked from me to her mother. I opened the envelope, spread the documents across the table, and let the silence stretch. "That," I said, tapping the top page, "is the deed to this house. Purchased in my name 15 years ago. Paid in full. Never co-owned. Never mortgaged. Never yours." The color drained from Denise's face. "You have 30 days to vacate," I continued. "All of you." Tyler started to speak, but I held up a hand. "Save it. You wanted me out. Now it's your turn." Their smug smiles vanished, replaced by something I'd been waiting years to see. Fear. The silence after I dropped the papers was thick enough to chew. It sat there between us, heavy and uncomfortable, as they all stared down at the black and white proof that every inch of this house, from the pool in the back to the tiles under their feet, belonged to me. Tyler was the first to break it. "This is a joke, right?" His voice cracked halfway through the sentence, and for a guy who spent half his life trying to sound like a tough man, that crack was music to my ears. "No joke," I said evenly. "It's legal, it's notarized, and it's filed with the county. My name's the only one on it." Denise finally found her voice. "Frank, come on. We've built a life here. You can't just—" I cut her off. "I didn't build this with you, Denise. I built it before you. Before Tyler. Before Megan. Every bill paid, every repair handled, every upgrade funded, all by me." Megan's eyes darted to her mother. "So what? You're just gonna kick us out? Where are we supposed to go?" I shrugged. "That's not my problem anymore. You decided I shouldn't be here, remember? Well, here's the twist. It's you who won't be here." They tried to regroup fast, I'll give them that. Denise sat up straighter, as if slipping into negotiation mode. "Okay, let's be reasonable. Maybe we got off on the wrong foot the other night. We can work something out." 30 days, I said flatly. Her lips tightened. "You can't be serious. Completely serious. I'll even put it in writing so you don't think I'm bluffing. You'll get an official notice tomorrow." Tyler pushed his chair back with a screech. "You can't do this to Mom." I leaned forward. "I can. And I am. And if any of you give me trouble, I'll file for a formal eviction. The sheriff will be here to help you pack." That shut him up. After dinner, I gathered my papers and left them sitting there in stunned silence. I went to my office, closed the door, and for the first time in years, I felt in control. But I also knew this was only the first volley. People like Denise and her kids don't fold after one shock. They regroup, they scheme, and they push back. Sure enough, the next morning, Denise showed up in my office doorway with coffee, something she hadn't brought me in months. "Frank, I was thinking, maybe we overreacted. Maybe the kids just need some space. We could take a little trip, clear the air." I looked up at her, my face blank. "This isn't a mood you can change with a weekend getaway, Denise. This is the result of years of disrespect. The trip you need to take is out the front door." Her smile faltered. "You're really not going to reconsider?" "No. And every day you spend trying to talk me out of it is one last day you have to find somewhere to live." She left without another word. Tyler's approach was different. He tried intimidation. That night, as I was locking up, he stepped into the hallway and blocked my path. "You know if you do this, you'll never hear from us again." I stared at him for a long moment. "Tyler, you're 23 years old, and the only reason you've been able to coast this long is because I kept a roof over your head. You think that threat scares me? You should be scared about how you're going to pay for gas next month." He stepped aside, muttering something under his breath. I didn't ask him to repeat it. Over the next week, the house drifted into two camps, me and them. They avoided me as much as possible, which was fine by me. When we crossed paths, conversation was minimal and frosty. Meanwhile, I got to work on the execution part of my plan. Step 1 was serving the official notice. I typed it up, had it signed and notarized, and handed copies to each of them. 30 days from today, I said, which means by this date next month, you'll be out. Step 2 was making it harder for them to pretend the house was still theirs. I started locking my office again, something I hadn't done in years. I changed the passwords on all the streaming accounts and Wi-Fi. When they asked why, I said, you'll need to set up your own in your new place. The first time Megan tried to stream a movie and hit a password wall, she stormed into the kitchen. This is petty. No, I said calmly. This is preparation. The second week brought the first real signs of desperation. I overheard Denise on the phone with her sister, trying to arrange a place to stay. I don't know, maybe just for a few weeks, she said, voice low. Until I can figure something out. Tyler started picking up extra shifts at the gym, which I knew wouldn't cover rent anywhere in Tampa. Megan became quieter, almost sulky, but I noticed her posting fewer flashy Instagram photos, probably saving whatever cash she had. Still, they hadn't hit the breaking point. Not yet. That came in week 3. Denise came to me in the evening, the kids hovering behind her like backup singers. Frank, we've been talking. This has gone far enough. You've made your point. I set down the book I was reading. Have I? Yes. We didn't mean for things to get this bad. Maybe we can start fresh. I tilted my head. By fresh, you mean I pretend you didn't try to push me out of my own home? Denise's jaw tightened. We just thought. That I'd roll over? That I'd fund your lives indefinitely while being treated like an unwanted guest? I shook my head. No. You thought wrong. And now you've got a week left. Tyler glared at me like he wanted to swing. Megan's eyes were glassy, the first sign that maybe this was finally sinking in. The last few days were almost enjoyable, in a twisted way. I watched as they scrambled, hauling boxes into the garage, making frantic calls, arguing in the driveway. Denise avoided me entirely. Tyler gave me dirty looks but kept his mouth shut. Megan, oddly enough, seemed almost subdued. On the morning of the deadline, they were still packing. I walked through the house slowly, taking inventory. The armchair I'd reclaimed sat exactly where I liked it. My office was undisturbed. The pool sparkled under the sunlight, and for the first time in years, I imagined sitting out there without feeling like a trespasser in my own backyard. Denise approached me at the door, keys in her hand. I hope you're happy, Frank. I met her gaze without flinching. I'm satisfied. She opened her mouth to say more, then thought better of it. They left without goodbyes. The reveal was complete, not just that I owned the house, but that I'd taken back every inch of it. And as I locked the door behind them, the quiet that settled over the place wasn't lonely. It was peaceful. I knew they'd struggle. Denise hadn't held a job in years. Tyler would burn through his savings, if he had any, in weeks. Megan would be forced to either work while in school or take out loans. Part of me hoped they'd learn something from it. Another part knew they wouldn't. Either way, it was no longer my burden to carry. The morning after Tyler and Megan hauled the last of their belongings into the back of Megan's boyfriend's beat-up sedan, the house was so quiet it felt like a different planet. No slamming doors. No passive-aggressive sighs from the couch. No Denise humming in the kitchen while pretending she wasn't watching me. Just the sound of the ceiling fan slicing through the humid Tampa air. I sat at the breakfast bar with my coffee, the ceramic mug warm in my hands, staring out at the backyard. The grass needed mowing, but for the first time in months, I didn't care. I was savoring the kind of peace you don't appreciate until it's been stripped from you. It wasn't just that they were gone. It was the way they left, their heads hung, their voices tight, their eyes darting everywhere but at me. They had arrived in this house full of entitlement and noise, convinced they were untouchable. Now, they'd left stripped of their smugness. The eviction had been clean, legal, and by the book. 30 days had ticked by like a slow metronome, each beat bringing them closer to the realization that their manipulation had backfired in the most public way possible. The neighbors knew. Denise's co-workers knew. Tyler's gaming buddies probably knew by now too. The irony? I never raised my voice. Never gloated. The law did the work for me. The night before the deadline, Denise had finally broken her silence. She came into the living room where I was reading, wearing that old blue robe she'd had since before we met. It was frayed at the sleeves now, just like her composure. "Frank, do you really have to go through with this?" she asked, voice small. I looked up at her, keeping my tone even. "I didn't go through with anything, Denise. The lease is over. The law is clear. They're my kids." Her lip trembled, but I noticed her hands were balled into fists. "They didn't know. They didn't care to know," I cut in. "They were too busy deciding my place in my own home." For a moment, I thought she might apologize. Instead, she turned away, muttering something about me never understanding family loyalty. That stung more than I expected. Because I had been loyal. To all of them. The day they left, I didn't help carry boxes. I didn't stop them either. I just stood in the doorway, sipping coffee, watching as they shuffled past me with their things. Megan avoided my gaze entirely. Tyler, in one final act of childish defiance, muttered, "Enjoy your empty house, old man." I smiled. "I will." That was the last thing I said to them. The first few days after their departure were intoxicating in their simplicity. I cooked breakfast without finding an empty milk carton shoved back into the fridge. I parked in my own driveway without having to dodge Tyler's friends' cars. I sat in the living room and heard nothing but the ticking of the clock. But peace has a way of making you reflective. And with reflection came the question, was I satisfied? I'd be lying if I said I didn't feel a sharp, private pleasure watching their plan implode. They had spent weeks smugly believing they'd outmaneuvered me, only to discover they'd been sitting on a trapdoor the whole time. Still, there was a bitterness under the victory. Because underneath the legal documents, the property deed, the locked doors, there was the undeniable fact that my marriage had crumbled not from outside forces, but from rot on the inside. I saw Denise once more, 2 weeks after the move-out, at a grocery store not far from the house. She was pushing a cart with just a loaf of bread and a carton of eggs in it, wearing the same tired expression I'd seen in those last months. She spotted me in the produce aisle and froze. For a moment, I thought she might turn and leave, but instead she walked over. "Frank," she said, not meeting my eyes. "Denise." There was a pause. "They're not doing great," she admitted, fiddling with the strap of her purse. "Megan's staying with a friend. Tyler's on some guy's couch. They say you ruined their lives." I leaned on the cart handle. "They ruined their own. I just stopped protecting them from the consequences." She flinched at that, and I knew the conversation was over before it began. She left without saying goodbye. Back home, I wandered through the house. The empty room still carried faint echoes of the chaos, scuffed baseboards, a dent in the hallway wall where Tyler had slammed a chair during an argument, a faint lipstick smear on the upstairs bathroom mirror from one of Megan's rushed mornings. I didn't plan to erase all of it. Some marks you leave, not because you like them, but because they remind you of what you survived. I replaced the locks, though. That was non-negotiable. About a month after they left, I hosted my brother and his wife for dinner. They'd been skeptical of my decision at first, warning me it might destroy the family permanently. "Looks like you've been sleeping better," my brother said between bites of grilled salmon. "I have," I replied, and I meant it. His wife asked if I'd heard from any of them. I shook my head. "Not directly. But word gets around. Tyler's working part-time at a warehouse. Megan's got a job at a salon. They're managing." She raised an eyebrow. "Do you feel bad?" I thought about it for a long moment. No. I feel resolved. If there was a final twist, it was this. A week after that dinner, I got a letter in the mail from Megan. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't even polite. It was 2 paragraphs of accusation, how I'd humiliated them, broken their mother, and taking revenge instead of showing compassion. I sat with it for a while, then slid it back into the envelope and put it in the drawer with my property deed. Because the truth is, she's wrong about one thing. This wasn't revenge. It was reclaiming what was mine, my home, my peace, my boundaries. And sometimes, the only way to teach people the weight of their actions is to let them carry it themselves. Now, months later, I still drink my morning coffee at the breakfast bar, watching the sun rise over the backyard. The grass is trimmed, the locks are secure, and the air is quiet. I'm not naive enough to think the story is over. People like Tyler and Megan have a way of circling back when they think you've softened. But if they do, the deed is still in my name, and I still hold the keys. Thank you for spending your time with my story. Feel free to share your thoughts or reactions in the comments. I'd love to hear from you.